Ole and Sven were farming brothers that lived way up in northern Wisconsin. And they had adjoining farms, and one day Ole walked over to Sven's farm, and Sven wasn't looking too good. He said, "Sven, what's wrong? Why do you look so down?" Sven said, "The outhouse is full. I got to get a shovel, I got to get buckets, I got to clean it out. I hate it. It's the grossest, most horrible job ever." Ole said, "What are you talking about, buckets and shovels? Look, there's a way that if you get just the right amount of dynamite, not too much, not too little, you open the door, keep it wide, you drop the charge into the hole. When the blast goes out, it forces all the manure out through the door, scatters on the lawn, you throw a little bit of sand on the top, and you're fine. You're finished. No dirt, no mess, no stink." Sven said, "Well, that's fantastic. Do you think I can try that? Do you know how much dynamite to use? We got to get this right." Ole said, "No problem. I know exactly how to do this." So they bound up the dynamite, put a nice waterproof fuse on it, opened the door wide, threw it in the hole, and ran and hid behind a pickup truck. But as they watched, much to their horror, Sven's wife, Olga, ran out of the house holding her stomach with pain on her face, ran right to the outhouse, shut the door. Sven and Ole said, No, get out!" But before they could even make it known to her there was danger, the explosion went off, and because the door was shut, the outhouse shot up in the air 20 feet, landed perfectly upright. Sven was terrified and mortified. He ran to the outhouse, he opened the door and said, "Olga, are you okay?" And Olga looked at him and said, "Sure, Sven, I'm fine. I'm just glad I didn't let that one go in the house." It is. That just happened, people. That just happened on a Sunday morning. I had to tell you this now because my parents are here next week, and I would literally get spanked on live from the loft by my father for telling that joke now. So this morning we have the story of a farmer. It's not about flying outhouses. It's about a farmer scattering seeds. And he scatters the seeds everywhere. And the point of this story, and the point of all of these stories, parables that Jesus tells in the New Testament, is to serve for us as a guide how to live this life. Really, gospel means literally good news. And what is the good news? The good news is this: that no matter what your circumstance is right now, no matter what is oppressing you now, you can know contentment and peace and joy if you follow the way of Jesus. The good news was to a people, and we think we're suffering now in this time. When Jesus was spreading good news to folk, they were suffering on a whole nother level. And he was showing these people that even in the midst of their pain and suffering, they could know peace and contentment and purpose and a deep life and joy. It didn't matter. These are stories to guide us through this life, to show us the best way to make our journey. So what is this story telling us about our journey? Well, the seed represents both the message of the way and the people that it affects. And so when we hear that the farmer scattered some on the side of the road that never germinates even, that never even begins to grow, because why? That person doesn't understand the message. You know, the simplicity of this message at the very beginning is simply this: I need to trust that I am not in control and God is. I need to embrace the fact that God is in control, and I need to rely on Him for everything. It's very simple, and yet it's life-changing. But I get it. For so many people, it's hard to believe. How can I simply put my faith and belief in a God that's bigger than me, that is in control, and simply surrender my will to God's will? How does that possibly make any difference? I've asked that myself. There was a time I couldn't understand that. But the truth I've come to know is that the moment I surrendered to that understanding is the moment positivity and good things began to build in my life and grow 30-fold, 60-fold. It is so simplistic that many folks simply can't commit to it intellectually. But the truth is, when we humble ourselves and admit that we need a God that loves us always, that's the beginning of the miracles. And it's hard for some to accept, and I get it. Now, what is the seed that gets thrown in the rocky ground, that comes up but is choked off because it's shallow? Jesus explains, well, those are the folks that have anxiety or let the fears of this world choke out the faith. That's really what it's about. It's about what happens when living this faith becomes too frightening. We walk away. Years ago, many years ago, I watched a great documentary by Steven Spielberg. It's called The Last Days. And I used to show it to my confirmation classes. And it chronicles the final solution that was done in Hungary. Hungary was the last place where they rounded up Jews for the concentration camps. And the saddest part about it all was that the war was already lost. This was like late 1944. They knew they had lost the war, and yet they continued with rounding people up. And I'll never forget this interview with a woman. And she says, "Do you want to know what the Nazi occupation of my village was?" It was 2 SS officers who pulled up into the town square on a motorcycle and sidecar, got out, and said, "Bring us your Jews." And my neighbors, the people I had been around all my life, the people whose weddings we had shared, whose funerals we had been at one another's, whose birthday parties we had shared, who we saw each day in the market, came and got us and brought us to the town square. These were Christians. I get it though. They were afraid. They were afraid for their own life. They were afraid for their wife's life, or their children's lives, or their husband's life. And so they dropped the message. And I don't sit in judgment of them. I can't say, oh, I would have been so brave. I don't do it. I even think to myself, how many of us were brave after 9/11 and stood up for our Muslim neighbors publicly and said, no, leave them alone, when we saw all the rage and anger? How many of us have been around an obnoxious uncle who begins to spout all kinds of homophobic or racist or sexist verbiage, and we shrink away because we don't want to upset the family, because we're afraid that the family will turn on us? You see how easy it is for fear to choke out the message? But we've got to be brave, because if we are not, the world looks like what happened in Hungary in 1944. And then there's the seed that falls among thorn bushes. And it grows up, and the thorn bushes choke it off. In other words, someone has gotten the message again, They're living the message, but it gets choked off, and Jesus says, this is the seduction of the world. This is looking for the things of the world to bring you your ultimate meaning and joy and happiness. In particular, he says riches, money. But the problem with money is it brings anxiety. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everything that is pleasurable of the world is a sin. That's not the point. The point is you cannot rightly appreciate the pleasures of the world unless your focus is in God, as in Christ. Otherwise, we make a God of these things. And so, if money becomes our God, we've got to always have more. And the minute we begin to lose it, we begin to think we're losing our God, and we become anxious. The minute we make anything outside of ourselves the focus of our life, the reason we are, the focus of our being, is the minute we bring our life and our world into anxiety. Because the things outside of us are temporal, they're passing, and they will always pass. Which brings anxiety, and we lose our peace, and we lose our contentment. It is only when we take that internal journey, when we find ourselves in Christ, in God, that we find a place that can never be taken from us, will never bring us anxiety. You know, Joseph Campbell died a number of years ago, but I really enjoyed him. He was a scholar in the field of world religions. He studied religions of the world his entire career, and he really had some deep insights. And he did this great series of interviews with Bill Moyer. I'm sure many of you saw those. They're really worth watching if you didn't. And I'll never forget him talking about a particular Hindu temple he was visiting while in India. He said at the entranceway of this temple were two poles, two totems. And in the one pole, on the one totem, was carved dragons, demons, frightening monsters. That totem represented fear, seeds in the rocks. On the other side of the doorway was a totem that was carved with all kinds of beautiful, nude, sensual bodies. That pole, that totem, represented desire. Seeds thrown in the thorn bush. And the symbolism was this. If you can walk past fear and desire, you'll find yourself in the temple. You'll find yourself in the presence of God. You'll find yourself in the deep peace of the sanctuary. You're never free until fear no longer controls you and desire no longer controls you. You're only free when you are in that much deeper place, which is the heart of God. And it is the way of compassion, the way of Jesus, that leads us into that peace. That's why we come each week. And we find it, and we practice it, and we remember it's what shows us where to go. And there are so many people that really are lost, don't know the journey there, don't know the path, the way there, and they're grabbing at things out there looking. And that's what worries me, as people are cut off from these stories, from these guideposts. Who will show them the way? You and I will. We'll try to lead them out of darkness into light, into the light that we live, into the joy that we found, and into the contentment that is ours. Amen.